I wonder why does everybody look at me and then begin to talk about a Christmas tree. I hope that means that everyone is glad to see the lady in the tutti frutti hat.
Hi everyone, my name is Najid.
And I'm Adam, and we'll be talking about the United States' influence in Latin America at the turn of the 20th century.
So we made a summary for our video. We have divided it into 4 different parts. Our first part is America as an empire. Our second part is the Banana Republic, so the beginning of the Banana Republic and the historic context as well.
Our third part will introduce bananas as our business, including race, labor, and colonialism. And our final part will be cultural flows, with a feature of Carmen Miranda.
Was America an empire at the turn of the 20th century? We encounter a first problem with the term itself. Empire is defined as an aggregate of nations or people ruled over an emperor or other powerful governments, usually a territory of greater extent than a kingdom, example, the Roman Empire. An example can be made solely of contiguous territories such as the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or of territories far remote from the homeland, such as a Spanish colonial empire.
Aside from the more formal usage, the term empire can also be used to refer to a large-scale business enterprise, a political organization controlled by a single individual, or a group. The term empire is associated with other words such as imperialism, colonialism, and globalization. The word is often used to describe displeasure to overpowering situations. The effects of imperialism exist throughout the world today.
Formal empires were the stuff that made Europe modern. They were systems that linked ideological domination, physical domination, and economic control governed from European capitals. By contrast, the US was a nation forged through anti-imperial struggle, a nation dedicated to the principles of freedom and self-determination. So how did the US become such an influential force in Latin America?
Since the very beginning, the United States has been an expansionist nation, at times by acquiring territory, and others by using American military and economic power to defend specific interests. Whether or not we call this imperialism is more a matter of political learnings than fact. During the first half of the century, the United States was a generally prosperous, stable society with an expanding population. Farm children from the East needed land to work, and it made sense that American expansion either came at the expense of increasingly weak European empires or nation-states that were in the midst of struggle and economic decline. North Americans fought 2 separate wars with Mexico, the first over Texas in 1836 and the Mexican-American War from 1847 to 1848.
Viewed from the South, these wars looked like acts of imperial aggression. Americans viewed them differently, as acts of destiny, as acts of God. These conquered territories did not become colonies. They were gradually incorporated into the United States. Their residents, newly citizens of the United States, which were the explicit racial and gender ideologies of the day.
Americans viewed other regions such as Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean in particular more skeptically as poor racial candidates for incorporation into the United States. In a country whose self-image was anti-imperialist, there was not enough political will to colonize these places, yet they had the raw materials American factories needed.
For the most part, United States intervention in Latin America during the early 20th century were limited to the relatively small nations of the Caribbean. When the United States took over larger nations, the results were not always favorable. General John Purcell's punitive expedition in Mexico was a case in point. Sent across the border to capture Pancho Villa, who had the valor to attack Columbus, New Mexico, the expedition returned home demoralized, its objectives unmet. The United States government did not even seriously contemplate military interventions in most of Mexico's large South American neighbors during these decades.
Increasingly, these nations depended on U.S. markets for their exports, and elites in these societies rely on U.S. aid and periodic military interventions to deal with their rivals. American investors in these countries often looked to the United States when their interests were threatened. American military power was a useful tool in their struggles against workers, peasants, and leftists, and it was not uncommon for these conservative interests to align with foreign investors in demanding U.S. intervention in the name of protecting lives, property, and order.
In the short run, these interventions had the effect of ensuring U.S. domination and protecting its foreign economic interest. In the long run, they produced a series of distortions that have had lasting impacts in both the United States and Latin America.
Part 2, Banana Republic. In a novel written by O. Henry Cabbages and Kings, he coins the phrase Banana Republic, describing the corruption of Central American governments and the power held by American fruit companies that he had noticed during his experience in Honduras. In essence, the phrase has become useful in explaining governments that support the exploitation of plantation agriculture in return for private profit of public lands, epitomizing the phrase Banana Republic.
Beginning in 1871, with the construction of the railroad in Costa Rica, the idea to planting bananas on either side of the tracks was introduced by American miner Keith. Within 10 years of flourishing banana growth, Keith had owned 3 banana companies, all in which transported bananas to Europe and the United States. In 1899, he merged with other companies to found the United Fruit Company, which owned banana plantations in several countries, more than 40 ships, some of which are known as the Great White Fleet, and 112 miles of railroad, linking plantations to ports for the distribution. It was not long until the United Fruit Company's empire had located its capital in Guatemala.
In 1901, the UFCO was granted a monopoly over the country's banana business by Guatemalan President Manuel Estrada Cabrera. In addition, he promised the company the power to veto legislation that may limit the company's potential in return for the cultivation of unproductive land. Though this would develop national wealth for Guatemala, it planted the seed for the United Fruit Company's power in Guatemala. As more land was cultivated for bananas by the UFCO, the more power it held. By 1952, the UFCO had been granted a total of 3 million acres of property in Guatemala.
As a small number of elites beneficiated from the banana production in Guatemala, peasants viewed the Guatemalan government and the United Fruit Company as rather repressive, undemocratic, and beholden to the company. In 1994, a group of junior officers led by Juan José Arevalo had overthrown the right-wing dictator. Instead of seizing the power for themselves, they called for Guatemala's first free election, seeking a nation less dominated by the Banana Republic. Coincidentally, Arevalo had won the election and was put into office in 1995.
After completing a successful 5-year term, Arevalo was succeeded in another free election by Jacob Arbenz Guzman, whose focus was to redistribute portions of the land that was not in use by the United Fruit Company. Arbenz claimed himself to be an anti-communist, although he felt that it was necessary to redistribute some of the unused land back to the Guatemalan people. He believed that the UFCO, a foreign company, obtained too much power, holding 42% of the land in the country. Initially, the land that was promised to the UFCO had been robbed of the Guatemalan peasants. Under the UFCO, the land was to be cultivated, therefore more profitable. This does not necessarily mean more profitable for Guatemala, but instead for the officials of the United Fruit Company and the politicians who had defended the company's interest. Though Arben's proposal of the redistribution of land known as Plan 900, the creation of a strong middle class was possible.
Part 3. Bananas are a business, race, labor, and colonialism. A definition of colonialism that embraces not only annexation and direct rule, but the informal and corporate models that characterize much of the late 19th and 20th century colonialism. American corporations joined Washington in exerting influence over Caribbean nations and carving out enclaves of direct control. U.S. government-held territories such as Puerto Rico and the Canal Zone were the most prominent examples, but private enterprises such as the United Fruit Company also sought to remake Caribbean landscapes and labor systems. Indeed, United Fruit was virtually an empire unto itself.
In the early decades of the 20th century, the corporation was the largest agricultural enterprise in the world and the dominant economic force in the Caribbean basin. Within this framework, then, colonialism does not necessarily require the existence of a colonial state, but rather direct foreign control over production and labor in a host society, leading inevitably to the engagement with local hierarchies and notions of identity. As in Panama, the domestic United States culture of white supremacy played a central role in shaping labor control and race relations in Guatemala's north coast.
United Fruit's domination of the North Coast grew directly out of the construction of the Northern Railroad. Guatemalan liberals had initially hoped to maintain national ownership of the rail line, but when the world coffee prices collapsed in 1897, they were forced to abandon those plans. The following year, Manuel Estrada Cabrera seized power. A prototypical liberal dictator, Estrada Cabrera dedicated himself to the completion of the railroad and concluded that only generous foreign concessions could achieve this goal.
In 1904, United Fruit's board of directors approved large-scale banana plantations in Guatemala. They assumed that only black workers could withstand the climate and diseases of the Caribbean lowlands. They also believed that racial hierarchy and segregation were essential aspects of labor control. As a result, United Fruit implemented colonialism throughout its Caribbean enclaves. United Fruit managers prided themselves on their ability to manage their black workforce. Like company officials throughout United Fruit's empire, they used a variety of forms of domination.
United Fruit's approach to medical care was equally racialized, as in Cuba, Panama, and Costa Rica, company engineers on Guatemala's north coast drained swamps, poisoned mosquito breeding grounds, built sewage systems, constructed managerial and worker housing, and built a modern hospital complex. But United Fruit's health policies reveal the racial limitations of its corporate culture. Like imperial officials throughout the world, its managers sought, above all, to make the colonial sphere safe for whites, and company researchers focused on diseases that most threatened white immigrants, such as malaria and yellow fever.
Whites lived and socialized apart from workers of color, who were excluded from white dining facilities, clubs, theaters, dances, tennis courts, and baseball leagues. As in other colonial spheres, this push for public and private segregation only grew as the company encouraged white family life. White women in particular were carefully separated from workers of color, who faced violent retribution if they transgressed the sexual color line. Whites carefully policed workers and each other, declaring racial hierarchies essential to the social order of the enclave. As in the United States, they justified such policies by asserting the natural antagonism of different races. Carmen Miranda. For more than a century, bananas have signaled the tropical essence of their place or origin. Even today, when we peel off the label of our Chiquita banana, we come face to face with the image of Carmen Miranda, the flamboyant outsider who makes us love her through her sheer force of personality. The lady in the tutti frutti hat brought to American wartime audiences an extravagantly seductive surface, the exotism of South America, a sensuality tempered by caricature, have an unsuspected origin in the black slums of Brazil.
Rachel Moreno defines it succinctly for us. We were oversexed, always left by the guy. You have to be vivacious, fiery, and exaggeration. This image paid off in the most tangible terms. In 1945, Carmen Miranda was the highest paid woman in the United States, but she was also increasingly trapped as the roles grew more fictional and the hats reached unparalleled heights.
Stereotypes are funny things. They can silence and marginalize individuals and groups, but they can also be quite useful, even to those who are stereotyped. On an individual level, they create a language that can sometimes be used for the personal benefits of the stereotyped. On a group level, they provide symbols that people may rally around in order to feel a sense of belonging. Even more, they can be comical signs of that group identified, points of departure for laughter as the collective says, "Oh, that is us." Bananas and banana culture formed a part of this for tropical Latin Americans. The banana was a symbol, however skewed, of a tropical culture that stood as an alternative to the alienated industrial lifestyles of the north. This was the image that Miranda parlayed to fame first in Brazil, then elsewhere.
American tourists were drawn both to Rio de Janeiro and other tropical paradises in search of the mystique she embodied. Carmen Miranda and other beautiful Latin American women, like Dolores de Rio, profited from these exchanges, along with hotel owners, musicians, vendors, and others who earn livings from the monetization of a stereotype. What is not certain is whether or not the benefits invariably outweigh the cost.
Thank you everyone for watching. We had an amazing time making the video.
Hope you guys enjoyed it. We definitely had fun making it. So yeah, thank you.